Today, we are joined on the podcast by a veteran administrator, and we're excited to talk a little bit about Minnesota. Let's get into it.
The Christian Principles Podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. But bear in mind, the views and opinions expressed here are those of the hosts and not necessarily of the Herzog Foundation.
Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zockoll. Today, as was noted in the intro, we are pumped to be joined by Pastor Alan Hodak. He is the executive director of the Minnesota Association of Christian Schools. You get to execute all the directives. What a blessing that is. Pastor Hodak, thanks for being with us today.
Good to be here.
Now, is it Pastor Hodak usually, or is it Alan, or is it the Principal Hodak? Like, what is the?
Oh, probably most people just called me Mr. H. Now they call me Pastor Alan here at the church. So,
Mr. H. All right. Now, where did Mr. H come from? Do you remember?
well, I don't know. I mean, it probably came from all the younger kids. You know, just got they butchered Hodak. I don't know how that could happen, but anyway, yeah, it probably just came from some of the little guys who just said, just call me Mr. H.
Yeah, that's a hard one to kill. I got my first nickname this year from a student as Dr. Z. Shelby, thank you for that. Every day walking in, good morning, Dr. Z. I was like, okay, all right, it's been coming, but I finally got there, so that's good. Matt, you still don't have a nickname, do you?
No, not one that I approve of anyway. It's hard to not, Mr. George. I mean, I've been George. Most people know me as George. They don't even know that's not my first name. They just...
Oh, okay, nice.
That's what it is.
Well, again, we're blessed today to be with Pastor Hodak here, and we are going to be asking him a lot about his time as the administrator of Fourth Baptist Christian School in Plymouth, Minnesota, but also in his present role as the executive director of the Minnesota Association of Christian Schools. Now, we need to do our penance again. We messed up a while back. I messed up a while back.
Correction. You need to do your penance. Let's just be clear.
I do a lot of background work for a lot of these people, and I just don't think the websites were updated. I think that's what it came down to. Was the administrator was listed the same place in both spots, but now you go back and check, and Fourth Baptist has updated things, and Jared Page is correctly listed as their principal now, and Pastor Allen is no longer where he was. But Pastor Allen, how long were you there? How long were you at Fourth?
I was at Fourth Baptist for 13 years.
Okay.
And prior to that, I was up at Chisago Lakes, now Christian School in Chisago City, Minnesota. So 20 years total in Minnesota.
Okay, very good. Anywhere before that?
Before that, I did a short 5-year stint in Michigan, and then I started my teaching career in Arizona and was there for a number of years teaching, and then cut my teeth on administration as well while I was there. Yeah.
Christian schools?
Yes, all Christian
Awesome.
schools. I'm sorry.
So where were degrees from?
Well, my original degree was a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University. I was not saved until I was 24.
Sun Devil.
Yeah, yeah, Sun Devil, go Devils. I just told this story the other night at a graduation ceremony that I did. I walked onto Arizona State's campus, and there were about 40,000 students, so it wasn't as big as it is now, but it certainly was huge in that day. And in the mall, the main mall, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids are trying to get to classes in the morning, and they have all these tables set up. Well, it was tables for various religions that the students were handing out pamphlets or information about. So you had the Baha'is, you had the Mormons, you had the JWs, you had Christian, you had I don't know what else. I mean, it was all over the place. And it just was shocking to me. I'd never seen anything like that before. And I started to ask myself the question, because I picked up a pamphlet from the Baha'i faith and started reading it. And it intrigued me. But yet I realized I have no idea what do I believe about God. And it was about that time that I went ahead and enrolled in a class, because part of my lower degree was 27 hours of English. I love English. I know I'm a little weird, but I love English.
Makes two of us over here.
Anyway, I began to take a class called Biblical Backgrounds Literature that was offered by ASU. But it was anything but that. The person that taught it really didn't believe in God, and he did everything he could to convince us that God was not real and Jesus was not God, and on and on and on. And I knew in my heart, because I had gone to Catholic grade school, I knew in my heart I believed in God and I believed in Jesus, but I really didn't know a whole lot. And so that helped kind of catapult me into a little journey where a lot of the writings for my classes, I would take topics, biblical topics, and just study them because I wanted to know what I believed. I wanted to know it was true. And about that time, the Lord sent this beautiful girl into my life. I worked at a grocery chain called Bash's in Arizona, and she began to witness to me um, all these Bible truths and verses that she memorized, and I was shocked at the number of verses she knew by heart. She'd gone to a Christian school in her earlier years, and she didn't know this, but I would ask her, well, where was that verse again that you just said to me? And I'd write it down on my little produce list. And then I would go home to my Catholic Bible and I would look it up to see if what she said, was really there. Did she really know what she was talking about? And lo and behold, man, it was verbatim. I
Wow,
was
there we go.
shocked and amazed. And so I had to figure out what this was all about. So I started attending her church, which was an independent Bible church in Phoenix. And it probably wasn't 2-3 months where the guys kind of took me under their wing. And I trusted in Christ at a service that explained what communion actually was.
Wow,
And so
okay.
that's how I came to know Christ. And that journey then catapulted me into I like kids. I liked working with kids, and I had been coaching at the downtown YMCA for basketball, 5th and 6th graders on Saturdays
Mm-hmm.
as I got to know people. And I fell in love with the kids. And of course, I love basketball. And as I started coaching, I realized, I really do want to teach and coach at the high school level. And the Lord is orchestrating all of this stuff at the same time. And so once I get saved, I start looking for work. And that's how it all kind of happened for me.
Then what got you into administration?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of things, as I started teaching, I taught for 3 years. I taught all the social studies, some English, and I was coaching. And frankly, what I saw, and it's not to degrade or any of the guys who were leaders at that time, but um, in those days, the schools were big. I mean, they were big schools. They struggled to make it financially. And I looked at the way things were being run, and again, I'm one of these guys that I'm always looking at stuff and thinking, okay, let's come up with an idea to make this better. And so I would look and evaluate various situations, and I would say, man, I'd say to myself, and this was probably a statement of pride, I could do this better. I could run this better. And especially with regard to finances, because one of the things one of the things the grocery business taught me was I did a lot of management in produce. And every month we had to take an inventory. And if you know anything about taking grocery inventory, it's horrible. And you got to count everything. You got to estimate product. When you get all done, you got to price it all out, extend your dollar value, and then you've got to figure out, what your final profit margin is. And if you didn't reach a certain profit margin, then you had to start doing your inventories every 2 weeks instead of every month. And it was like a punishment. And the company was serious. No matter what size of the store, you're going to make at least this profit, if not more. And so I learned a lot about the tricks of, what does it take to get to a certain profit margin. I learned how to display, the whole thing, merchandising, displaying, how much you order, how you control, the product, all that kind of stuff. And that actually taught me how to run a Christian school. And you might think, well, that is weird from the business side. When you order curriculum, when you run a lunch program, how you make daycare and preschool work, and how much do you charge, and how many people do you need, and how much scholarship can you offer? I mean, when you start really narrowing it down, you have to, in a sense, run your Christian school as you would run a business. And if you don't do it that way, then your school often is going to falter. And if it's a church school, like most of our AACS schools are, the church is going to have to make up the financial shortfall. And if you do that enough times, you're not going to have a lot of support from your people. So,
Oh, man.
I learned that all through the early years. Where I was deficient probably was in the areas of curriculum and probably in just the overall academics. I had to learn that. So I learned that by either taking courses or CEUs or listening to certain teachers that I learned about who were really, really solid in those areas at various conventions. And I began to learn and study on my own once I began to teach and then began to administrate. Just how to work on the areas of my deficiencies, because there were a few areas of strength that I had, and those I did well, but no, the areas of deficiency, man, I had to really work on those. So that's what initially got me into it. I think, as a Christian school teacher too, you don't make a lot of money. And I had married that beautiful girl that had, began to witness to me, thankfully. And we ended up having lots and lots of kids. We have 5 daughters and 15 grandchildren now. My youngest
Wow.
just got married 2 weekends ago, so I'm now free. I'm free. But
Free.
I was able to make a little bit more in the administrative end, not a lot initially, but a little bit more, which allowed me. I actually still worked in produce at the Bashas' store. The Lord led me there. I mean, I could tell you story after story of how God just affirmed a direction. And it was clear to me that God wanted me to move in that direction as I began to, to really discover what Christian school administration was all about.
Pause. No, I don't mean pause the episode. I mean, let's take a pause from the episode so I can talk to you about the Herzog Foundation. Mark and I are honored to partner with this amazing organization. Like the Christian Principles podcast, Herzog wants to see your school grow and be successful. To help you achieve those next steps, you will definitely want to check out the Herzog Foundation Institute. Whether you are looking for some quick online training or have the desire to grow with fellow educators at a conference, HFI has you covered. What's even better is that as long as you can get yourself to the many conferences offered throughout the year, Herzog will cover all the costs while you're there, including food and hotels. You really can't beat that. Head over to herzogfoundation.com and get yourself and your team signed up for some training today. What are you waiting for?
Now, here's what I hear. What I hear is that ASU is actually an evangelical school. And I also hear that my undergraduate was garbage. I should have just gone to be a grocery store worker. And that would have much more prepared me for the role that God had for me coming up. No, what a blessing to see God use us, change. Matt specifically did not want to be an administrator. He made that very clear until he became the administrator. And what wonderful stories. That's awesome. Hey, so you were the administrator. You wound up at Fourth. I imagine it's during your time at Fourth that you were asked to become the executive director of Max.
Well, I actually volunteered. We lost our executive director passed away, and we didn't have anybody, and we were kind of reeling as an organization. And so I went to Pastor Portman from Woodcrest, because he was the president at the time, and just said, hey, I would love to do this. I think I can handle it. I like being involved in multiple things. What do you think? And we had lunch, and he thought about it, and that's kind of how that happened.
You came at a time of, we could say crisis. Now, when we say Max, I have to be really careful because Matt, of course, and Faith Baptist School, and I have a couple roles in Max as well, but it's the Maryland Association of Christian Schools. So it's the daughter of the AACS. Well, I guess no. Max stands alone, and then it is the arm of AACS in Maryland, but it would still exist if AACS didn't exist. So that's how they would want to phrase that. But in any case, the Macs of the East Side versus the Macs of the North Midwest.
Well, Michigan thinks that they are the Macs, but that's just not true.
It's true. Yeah.
Oh man,
we let Michigan think what they want to think. That's fine.
That's Pastor Jackson, right? Now we're gonna have to have a fight between these guys.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll hear about it, but that's okay.
So I need to explain the connection, especially when we bring up Pastor Jackson. Pastor Jackson was my parents' youth pastor back in the day. So I knew him all growing up. But then Pastor Poorman, his son, Mark Jr., is now my brother-in-law. So I'm connected to them very, very closely as well. But yeah.
Junior now is the administrator of Woodcraft.
He is, with much fear and trembling.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
But he's doing a fantastic job.
Yes, he's mature. He knows what he was getting into, and that was the same with Jared Page. Jared Page was not interested initially in that, and I had really wanted him to be initially the administrator, but the Lord worked it out, and Jared is now in that position and also doing a very good job.
So were Fourth and Woodcrest any kind of appropriate rivals? Were they any kind of what was the relationship like there?
Oh, I think initially we were inappropriate rivals.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some there was some serious unhealthy rivalry in the early years when I first went to Chisago 20 plus years ago. It would have been 22 years ago now, and a lot of us had to get together because and I would say that I wasn't necessarily not guilty of fueling the fire a bit, because I think everybody was so extremely competitive athletically, and we had some incredible games and incredible athletes. The level of competition was a little bit higher, and we didn't like each other, to be quite honest. And when we got on the court, it wasn't always good. And I remember Lauren Isaacs, who's now retired from Woodcrest, he and I got together for lunch. And we had the discussion about, this is what we're seeing even between our own two schools is unhealthy. We're not even talking about the others. And we decided that we were going to make some changes, and we were going to be working with our kids better about what was right. We were going to start doing some activities after games together where we'd mix the teams. It wasn't any big deal. It was like having pizza together afterwards. It was like praying together. We did that, but wasn't the same. Sometimes we'd buddy up. Sometimes, the effort was to get to know one another. And what was really cool, and this is one of the reasons when I made the transition from Chisago to Fourth that I stayed there, was because we'd worked at really bringing our schools together. And what we were seeing between the kids was really, really cool.
That's awesome.
And, it took a while. Any investment, this I think is something that I've learned in my lifetime. You got to be willing to invest at least a good 5 to 7 years into something if you want to see it develop into something that you're envisioning. If God's given you a vision, like for a school, you can't say after 2 years, oh, this is too hard, it's not working. No. You got to make at least a good 5-7 year commitment, because the only way it's going to happen is over time. People are going to, understand what you're trying to do, and then come alongside, and your staff and everybody else. And when they see the progress, then it starts to take off. And that's kind of what had to happen with athletics. We really had to work hard together to bring our kids and bring our coaches. We started doing things like camps together. I started inviting coaches to come and coach at the camp. I remember the first basketball camp I did, I invited 5 of the Max coaches to come, and I wanted them to do one little thing, like take one day. And it was really cool because, you start doing these little things, and what ends up happening is relationships, change, and, you see them at a game. And
that is awesome.
It's just little stuff. And sending them a note. I remember we had a new coach at one of the schools, and he was losing every game, but he was doing the right things, and I could see that. And so, I send him an email or call him, and and just say, hey, you know what? You got thumped, the other night, but you know what you're doing is right. Don't give up. Keep moving ahead. Keep working on these little skills, and you're going to see it pay off. And it did. We are fiercely independent in Minnesota. I think in the past we try to protect. Our attitude is one of protection, and justifiably so from what's happening in Minnesota. But we have to see the bigger picture of Christian education and really help one another, because if we don't, those schools just aren't going to survive.
Man, I think you are going to be an official co-host of this podcast soon, in so much that we're on the same page with the mission. The rising tide floats all boats. We want to share knowledge, not silo knowledge.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure my wife is listening to this, because she is probably one of those kids that fueled that rivalry back in Woodcrest days. But as a coach now, like, that is exactly her coaching style, and I guarantee it comes from that. I'm sure she was there during that time of transition of let's not forget that while we're competing, and we had an episode where we talked about, re-examining competition. It's not we're against them. We're striving together with them. And just changing that perspective and that attitude is so important. It's something we try to do here as well. But every Christian school ought to be doing that. It makes so much sense.
What are some other struggles? What are some other struggles that you would say are facing Max member schools right now?
Oh boy, well, I think probably the biggest, is finding qualified teachers, because when you look at what we are looking for, a specific type of teacher who then is going to become a member of the church. So you're looking at salvation, you're looking at doctrinal belief, and then I hope you're as well looking for academic qualification. And so what ends up happening is you got a little box to choose from. You don't have a big selection. And so finding people now who fit us, who are qualified, who are willing to work, of course, for what we can afford to pay, these are difficult things. And I think that's why accreditation has changed so much. AECS accreditation has changed drastically, following the models of the bigger accreditors, simply because they've had to bend and change the qualifications for finding teachers, having to be creative in, really how you train and what you require, at least from my perspective. And these become some pretty big challenges as you're looking for people. And I know there have been years when you just can't find anybody, and you grab somebody and they have some kind of qualification, and you beg them and plead, and how can I get you to teach half a day or whatever it is, and you become creative in fulfilling that role, and you get through. But I'm not sure that sometimes we're able to offer the best when we have to piece it together. However, that's relative, because I think everybody's in the same boat. So, you're trying to have academic excellence, but I think more importantly, you've got to have spiritual excellence, and you got to have people who integrate Bible truth. You got to have people who live as a testimony for Christ before the kids. And that's more important to me as a parent than the academic end actually is. Now, some people may get angry at that, but as a dad of 5, I praise the Lord. And I thank the Lord every day that all 5 of my girls all have families. They all they're all in church. They're all involved. None of them walked away from the Lord. And I know that's by the grace of God. But I also think that a big part of that had to do with a couple of parents who tried to live that out before them. And then 10s and 20s and 30s of different teachers who lived that out, and we were blessed enough to be able to have them go through Christian Ed all through their lives. These are huge things, but it is the biggest challenge I think we face right now. And then probably even a bigger one is administration. Nobody wants to be a Christian school administrator, so it's hard work.
We hear you say that. We've thought through that. We've even done some episodes on recruitment and things like that. But we share like mind in that we value a person's spiritual walk first and foremost, which makes it a very small pool, as you said. But what you would affirm as well is that makes it all the more amazing when God does bring into our midst those who he brings to help us out, right? And then we're amazed repeatedly by the quality of persons that he brings in to help us do what we do. So somewhere between we have the faith and then we do all that we can. Anything else that you would say is struggles facing the MAC schools right now? We mentioned the teachers. We mentioned administration.
I think I've written down 4 things here if I can. I created what I've called administrative boot camp. And what it is just me being willing to take somebody for a day or two. And I just had a young man come who's going to become an administrator of one of our smaller schools in Minnesota. And I just ran him through topical outline of points and showed him materials and talked through PowerPoints and things that I've developed over my career that would hopefully help him realize what he needed to do in order to run an effective school from the outset. And so, I take topics like, what does the philosophy look like? The mission and purpose look like throughout your school? How do you evaluate teachers effectively? Should admissions look like? Because I believe that admissions ultimately controls your school. If you have a good admissions process, you're going to get a pretty good group of kids. And on and on and on. And I've tried very hard. I've only taken 3 guys through this, but they all lasted for a while at the schools they went to. So I consider at least a partial success.
Yeah.
But I would say to the veterans that are listening, you can do this, and you just do it over the summer. And, maybe you've got a young guy who doesn't have a lot of experience, but, or maybe a guy who's taught for you, who you see maybe has some gifts. And man, you can just take him through. I didn't know a lot coming in. I mean, I had secondary education in social studies English, whoop-de-doo. But I didn't know anything about how to run a school except for that I had management training in the grocery store. And so I was able, through that experience, to go into it. But I would not have been the perfect candidate in any way, shape, or form.
Our church has a preacher boy program. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about some sort of principal internship program where they have to go in their summertime.
I'm sure there will be.
Yeah, that would be
will be
amazing. Yep. And what an amazing thing that would help whatever school is housing them and paying them for the summertime as this intern, because there will be benefit gained back from having the outside view, the younger person, so on and so forth. That'd be awesome.
The third one was just creating, every school has a unique makeup of some kind. Some schools, they thrive because they have a large preschool. Other schools thrive because, they have certain churches feeding in, or Christian schools, and they get really quality kids. Fourth thrived, are you ready? Because about a quarter of our population was Russian, Ukrainian, Moldavian. And when I first went, I didn't realize we had a huge church, several churches actually, that fed in, who were Russian-speaking churches. And the Russian families, by and large, want their kids to know their language and their culture. They have them go to school on the weekends. And oftentimes you will get kindergartners who have never spoken a lick of English. Well, I realized we had 5 or 6 kids per classroom. And I'm like, what are we going to do? Because all the kids were struggling in language. And so what we had to do is we had to start an ESL program. Well, how does a small Christian school start an ESL program? You know what I mean? I mean, now you got a new salary, you got new requirements, but the Lord blessed, and we continued to grow that program up. And ESL is a big component of Fourth Baptist Church and Christian school. Same thing with special ed. If you have to decide as a school, because you're going to have a couple of kids per classroom that have learning challenges, and you have to decide to what extent as a school are you going to be able to accommodate. Are you going to take behavioral issues? Probably not. We didn't. But I was willing to work, we were willing to work with kids who had academic struggles, as long as they could be mainstreamed into the classroom. So you have to set up things like testing. And eventually we created our own little special ed program. And we might have had a dozen to 20 kids in that program as the school grew. Those were the components that caused Fourth to double in size, because we finally decided as a group, you know what, do we want to grow? And I had to go to the teachers, and we had to have a serious conversation at a teacher meeting. And I had to say to them, look, you know, we're at a point to where we have to decide, are we going to allow these programs to be developed so that we can accommodate more kids coming in? And if not, because this is our constituency, that's the key. God sends you a constituency, and you have to decide if you're going to minister to that constituency. You're happy with the status quo. A lot of our AACS schools stay there, and a lot of our AACS schools in Minnesota have had to close because they were not willing to go in a different direction. Not that you're compromising in any way, but it is what you develop based on whom God is sending you. So, you know, these are big issues. I do think that our schools are going to grow now. I think they're going to multiply. I think they're going to get bigger. I think that based especially even in Minnesota, where there's no entitlements, enablements, and probably never will be, our schools are doing quite well. They're growing quite, not huge, because we're, you know, like some of our schools are kind of landlocked. There's no place for them to grow unless they build up, if they can, and they're pretty full. But there are some schools that can grow and are growing, and they're going to become schools of, you know, 5, 6, 7, 800 kids, I would say, within a 5-year period.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know we talked about some of the struggles. Are there some exciting things that are on the docket for Minnesota schools in the coming years?
Well, it's certainly exciting and challenging. Yeah, we decided to form a new sports league. We used to have our own MAC sports league, and we joined forces with the Cal League, which was a group of about the same size numbers of schools as we are. And we just finished our first year of a combined athletic conference. It's a different name. It's called MCAC instead of MAX. And a lot of challenges there, of course. But I think overall, it more than doubled the size of our athletics, and it will allow us to maybe do some other different athletics down the road. State tournaments, because they're much bigger, that becomes now a new challenge. But it's been interesting to see how that has affected our group. And of course, we were looking as the schools got bigger, because, you know, in our MAX, you have 4, 5, or 6 fairly good sized schools, and then you got a bunch of little ones. And it was hard to be competitive within MAX. And so couple of schools were always dominating, and we had to kind of figure out, what are we going to do about that? So that's what precipitated the talks. And those talks went on for years, to be quite honest. But we finally got together and put a league together. And that's been one of the challenges moving forward. Because it is larger, it takes more time, more effort. It's tougher on the calendar, so a lot has to be worked out there. But we're doing okay with that.
There you
And
go.
like I said, the challenges will continue. I think the other things that we are seeing that are exciting is just the overall increase. It's fun to see the schools growing. You have to look at the challenges just like that. You got to look at the challenges as blessings, not as curses, because, you know, with the growth comes lots and lots of different kinds of challenges. But yet, I'm excited about that. As I look at Max, I do think we're going to see, you know, maybe a 7-8% growth spurt this next year. And I do think we'll continue to see that continue to in the next 5 years, unless something weird happens to the economy.
All right. We do definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us. This was awesome.
Well, thank you. Anytime, I'd love
we
to.
had a great time.
Yeah.
So I think we have everything that we need. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
We just got to keep praying for one another. The challenges of what may go on, especially in a place like Minnesota or Maryland with regard to legislation. We're constantly watching that. We encourage our people to make contacts with their own legislators, get to know them, so they have a listening ear, hopefully, when something comes up that they need to talk to them about. It's hard to get our parents to write letters, but, you send your emails and get them to try to make calls and write emails and letters to their legislators too when certain issues come up. You just keep asking the Lord to protect what we have enjoyed. We really have enjoyed the blessings of Christian education for a long time. And what I always tell the legislators that I do talk to or write to, they'll ask me, "What do you want?" And I'll say, "I don't want anything. I just want you to leave us alone." And that's not disrespectful. It's just let us operate the way we always have. Please let us just operate autonomously, independently, according to our religious and doctrinal beliefs, and we will remain supportive and happy campers. We will produce your best citizens.
And that's the
That's
key.
just all there is
That's
to
the
it.
key. Hey, Pastor Hodak, question
Yes, sir.
for you. At the end of these conversations, we like to spotlight a Christian school administrator. Now, you mentioned that there was a young man who had gone through a boot camp of yours recently. You know what? We didn't know that walking in, but we would love to send that man some encouragement for the role he's getting ready to walk into, I suppose, next year. So would you mind sharing that name with us? And then we will, Matt will pray for him live, and then we will make sure we get the rest of his information and send him off one of them canary envelopes of encouragement.
Right. Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So it's Cade Sanders. It's Owatonna Christian School in Owatonna, Minnesota.
Owatonna.
Owatonna, the old home of Pillsbury.
Yep.
Yeah, remember that? Yep. So, yeah, he's entering a new role. Young guy, eager to learn, has a lot of energy. So, yeah, he's going to need some prayer.
And he currently is the administrator there?
Just hired.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Well, you tell him where we are, and Matt's going to pray for him now.
Awesome.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. We thank you for Pastor Alan and his heart for Christian education, even in helping those that are new to leadership, and just gaining confidence. We thank you for Cade entering into this new chapter of his life's ministry there in Owatonna. I just pray that you would give him wisdom, give him guidance, give him the team, the support that he needs to just have the confidence that knowing what he is doing is a great work. Pray as he prepares for the upcoming school year, that just all the plans would fall into place, and that he would have what he would need to just have a great school year next year. We thank you so much for our time, and pray that you would bless us as we go from here. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Mr. H. Thank you, Mr. G. Thanks for growing with us today.
Before you go, please be sure to hit that follow button on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, on Spotify, be sure to tap the star icon near the top and select the number of stars you'd like to give us. We'd be so grateful for 5. On Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the ratings and review section and then tap write a review to share your thoughts of the podcast. Thank you.